Hey babe, and anybody else watching, and welcome back to A Life Together. Today, 2 Samuel 13 and 14. If you remember yesterday, we were looking at the story of David defeating the Ammonites, David and Bathsheba, and then also Nathan's rebuke of David. Now, today we're going to be looking at the start of the fallout. And God already warned David what is going to be happening now that he was with Bathsheba. David had already been given the kingship, and it wasn't enough. So we're starting off some of the dark path, I guess I'll say, of the story of his family. And that starts off with Amnon and Tamar, and then Absalom killing Amnon, and then Absalom returning to Jerusalem. This isn't the last that we're going to see of Amnon. There's a lot here. And again, it all starts with this just real crazy downturn of events, some really dark stuff. So 2 Samuel 13 and 14 is where we're reading. So 2 Samuel 13. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. Amnon became frustrated to the point of illness on account of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. Now, Amnon had a friend named Jonadab, son of Shimea, David's brother. Jonadab was a very shrewd man. He asked Amnon, "Why do you, the king's son, look so haggard morning after morning? Won't you tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I am in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Go to bed and pretend to be ill," Jonadab said. "When your father comes to you, say to him, 'I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight, so I may watch her and then eat it from her hand.'" So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. When the king came to see him, Amnon said to him, "I would like my sister Tamar to come and make some special bread in my sight, so I may eat it from her hand." David sent word to Tamar in the palace, "Go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food for him." So Tamar went to the house of her brother Amnon, who was lying down. She took some dough, kneaded it, made the bread in his sight, and baked it. Then she took the pan and served him the bread, but he refused to eat. "So send everyone out of here," Amnon said Amnon said. So everyone left him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food here, into my bedroom, so I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the bread she had prepared and brought it to her brother Amnon in his bedroom. When she took it to him to eat, he grabbed her and said, "Come to bed with me, my sister." "Don't, my brother," she said to him. "Don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Why do this wicked thing? What about me? Where could I go to get rid of my disgrace? And what about you? You would be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you." But he refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than she, he raped her. Then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he loved her. Amnon said to her, "Get up and get out." "No," she said to him, "sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you have already done to me." But he refused to listen to her. He called his personal servant and said, "Get this woman out of here and bolt the door after her." So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. She was wearing a richly ornamented robe, for this was the kind of garment the virgin daughters of the king wore. Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the ornamented robe she was wearing. She put her hand on her head and went away, weeping aloud as she went. Her brother Absalom said to her, "Has that Amnon, your brother, been with you? Be quiet now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman. When King David heard all this, he was furious. Absalom never said a word to Amnon, either good or bad. He hated Amnon because he had disgraced his sister Tamar. 2 years later, when Absalom's shepherds were in Baal-Hazor near the border of Ephraim, he invited all the king's sons to come there. Absalom went to the king and said, "Your servant has had shearers come. Will the king and his officials please join me?" "No, my son," the king replied. "All of us should not go. We would only be a burden to you." Although Absalom urged him, he still refused to go, but gave him his blessing. Then Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon come with us." The king said to him, "Why should he go with you?" But Absalom urged him. So he sent him Amnon and the rest of the king's sons. Absalom ordered his men, "Listen, when Amnon is in high spirits from drinking wine, I say to you, strike Amnon down, then kill him. Don't be afraid. Have I not given you this order? Be strong and brave." So Absalom's men did to Amnon what Absalom had ordered. Then all the king's sons got up, mounted their mules, and fled. When they were on their way, the report came to David, "Absalom has struck down all the king's sons. Not one of them is left." The king stood up, tore his clothes, and lay down on the ground, and all his servants stood by with their clothes torn. But Jonadab, son of Shemaiah, David's brother, said, "My lord should not think that they had all been killed, or that they'd killed all the princes. Only Amnon is dead. This thing has been Absalom's expressed intention ever since the day Amnon raped his sister Tamar. My lord the king should not be concerned about the report saying that all the king's sons are dead. Only Amnon is dead." Meanwhile, Absalom had fled. Now the man standing watch looked up and saw that many people on the road west of him coming down the side of the hill. The watchman went and told the king, "I see men in the direction of Horonaim on the side of the hill." Jonadab said to the king, "See, the king's sons are here. It has happened just as your servant said." As he finished speaking, the king's sons came in, wailing loudly. The king too and all his servants wept very bitterly. Absalom fled and went to Talmai, son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur, but King David mourned for his son every day. After Absalom fled and went to Geshur, he stayed there 3 years, and the spirit of the king longed to go see Absalom, for he was consoled during Amnon's death. Chapter 14. Joab, son of Zeruiah, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom, so Joab sent someone to Tekoa and had a wise woman brought from there. He said to her, "Pretend you are in mourning. Dress in mourning clothes, and don't use any cosmetic lotions. Act like a woman who has spent many days grieving for the dead. Then go to the king and speak these words to him." And Joab put the words in her mouth. When the woman from Tekoa went to the king, she fell with her face to the ground to pay him honor, and she said, "Help me, O king." The king asked her, "What is troubling you?" She said, "I am indeed a widow. My husband is dead. I, your servant, had 2 sons. They got into a fight with each other in the field, and no one was there to separate them. One struck the other and killed him. Now the whole clan has risen up against your servant. They say, 'Hand over the one who struck down his brother, so that we may put him to death for the life of his brother whom he killed. Then we will get rid of the heir as well.' They would put the only burning coal I have left, leaving my husband neither name nor descendant on the face of the earth." The king said to the woman, "Go home, and I will issue an order on your behalf." But the woman from Tekoa said to him, "My lord the king, let the blame rest on me and on my father's family, and let the king and his throne be without guilt." The king replied, "If anyone says anything to you, bring him to me, and he will not bother you again." She said, "Then let the king invoke the Lord his God to prevent the anger of blood from adding to the avenger of blood from adding to the destruction, so that my son will not be destroyed." "As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "not one hair of your son's head will fall to the ground." Then the woman said, "Let your servant speak a word to my lord the king." "Speak," he said. The woman said, "Why then have you devised a thing like this against the people of God? When the king says this, does he not convict himself? For the king has not brought back his banished son. Like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be recovered, so we must die. But God does not take away life. Instead, he devises ways so that a banished person may not remain estranged from him. And now I have come to say this to my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid. Your servant thought, 'I will speak to the king. Perhaps he will do what his servant asks. Perhaps the king will agree to deliver this servant from the hand of the man who is trying to cut off both me and my son from the inheritance God gave us.' And now your servant says, May the word of my lord the king bring me rest. For my lord the king is like an angel of God in discerning good and evil. May the Lord your God be with you." Then the king said to the woman, "Do not keep from me the answer to what I am going to ask you." Let my lord the king speak," the woman said. The king asked, "Isn't the hand of Joab with you in all of this?" The woman answered, "As surely as you live, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right or to the left from anything my lord the king says. Yes, it was your servant Joab who instructed me to do this, and who put all these words into the mouth of your servant. Your servant Joab did this to change the present situation. My lord has wisdom like that of an angel of God. He knows everything that happens in the land." The king said to Joab, "Very well, I will do it. Go, bring back the young man Absalom." Joab fell with his face to the ground to pay him honor, and he blessed the king. Joab said, "Today your servant knows that he has found favor in your eyes, my lord the king, because the king has granted his servant's request." Then Joab went to Geshur and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. But the king said, "He must go to his own house. He must not see my face." So Absalom went to his own house and did not see the face of the king. In all Israel, there was not a man so highly praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. From the top of his head to the sole of his foot, there was no blemish in him. Whatever he cut the hair of his head, he used to cut his hair from time to time when it became too heavy for him. He would weigh it, and its weight was 200 shekels by the royal standard. 3 sons and a daughter were born to Absalom. The daughter's name was Tamar, and she became a beautiful woman. Absalom lived 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing the king's face. Then Absalom sent for Joab in order to send him to the king, but Joab refused to come to him. So he sent a second time, but he refused to come. Then he said to his servants, "Look, Joab's field is next to mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire." So Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Then Joab did go to Absalom's house, and he said to him, "Why have your servants set my field on fire?" Absalom said to Joab, "Look, I sent word to you and said, 'Come here, so I can send to the king and ask, why have I come to Geshur, or why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me if I were still there. Now then, I want to see the king's face, and if I am guilty of anything, let him put me to death.'" So Joab went to the king and told him this. Then the king summoned Absalom, and he came in and bowed down with his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. Again, we see just a lot of really, really, really dark stuff here. And we kind of have to ask, what happened in all this? What happened with David? Why was he not reining some of this in? There's a note here on 1329. 1329 says, let me get there. So Absalom's men did to Amnon what Absalom had ordered. Then all the king's sons got up, mounted their mules, and fled. This note says, what went wrong with David's children? Amnon raped his sister Tamar. Absalom killed Amnon in revenge. Ultimately, Absalom plotted a coup against his father, driving David from Jerusalem. All through these events, rape, murder, rebellion, David failed to discipline his children. According to the law, they deserved severe punishment, but David let them off with hardly a word. Perhaps his own guilt over Bathsheba had undercut his sense of moral authority. I think last year when I read through this passage, I mentioned that note as well. And I think that is such a interesting, poignant note. It appears as if God didn't bring this hardship on David, but he did tell him, this is what's going to happen now that you have done this. And sure enough, the effects of the actions that David took are seemingly what impacted his discipline of his own children. I mean, if he feels guilty for all that he did with Bathsheba, then absolutely. I mean, his own sense of moral authority has been undercut by his own actions. So we see that it's this judgment that God is allowing, and then maybe bringing as well. But it is interesting that we note that. And I think that's something for us to be so aware of as well. I said, this is why we need God in the daily. It's not just the big things. So David needed God in his everyday parenting. And I think that's so true of us as well. I mean, we need God not just in these big stressful moments, either through a difficult time with our family, or a difficult thing at work, or maybe there's a relationship we're struggling with. It's not just that. We need him in the day-to-day. And when we miss that, there can be impacts and effects, and there will be, where we are distancing ourselves from God. And we definitely need him in the day-to-day. So let's pray about it. God, I thank you for your word. I thank you for this time where we can look at the consequences of actions, Lord. Please remind us and help us to remember that it's not just in the big moments, in the big celebrations, or in the big difficulties when we need you, God. It is in the day-to-day activities. Lord, you want the best for us, that we would bring you glory and honor and spread the name of your Son, Jesus. Help us to remember that in the day-to-day and not get so self-focused or so downtrodden that we don't spread your word and that we don't spread your love. Once again, God, we thank you so much for all the biblical examples, but infinitely more for the perfect example of your Son, Jesus. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. That is about all I have for you today. As always, know I appreciate you. And wife, appreciate you tons. Plan on seeing you tomorrow. Have a good one.